So now that we have heard from so many bridge builders, I would like to invite my good friends, and here are the invitees who are going to be on the this platform, this panel. Mr. Earl Cox of Israel Always in South Carolina, and Sondra Oster Baras of Christian Friends of Israel Communities here in Israel and Carnation Run, Rabbi Michael Freund of Shavei Israel, or Shavei Yisrael, from Jerusalem, Israel, but we all know that you live in Ra'anana, Michael. And my good friend, as I said, Christine Darg, who's always there in a pinch. Christine was expecting to show her 5-minute video as part of her 10 or so minutes of talking, but I guess she'll have to come up with something else to say. We'll maybe give her a little bit less time than the others. And I will begin my questions with Christine. If anybody else has any questions, please add them in the chat. And I will start with Christine. I will put her as the pinned video. I hope you can see her. I certainly am happy to be able to do that. Christine, would you tell us what you think that God is doing with Christians and Jews today?
Well, first of all, I want to say to everybody watching how wonderful it has been, Gidon. I've been so touched, genuinely touched, and I know you all have to hear the love, the unprecedented fellowship that's happening now between Jews and Christians. This is something that we've longed for so many decades, and it's happening, and it's so genuine. And we really want to thank you again. I'm sure everyone agrees with me, Gidon, that you have reached so far. You have reached beyond culture and fear. You've overcome all of these things to ask for our friendship. And it's been incredibly beneficial for all of us. And I believe that, as I said in that short video, that we are living in a unique time where we're going forward, because this time is similar to the time of the early church, when Jews and when the nation of Israel and the church existed side by side. We have this unique period of grace happening right now, when Israel once again, hallelujah, miraculously is existing side by side with the church. And so many people in the churches don't understand what's going on. They don't understand how we can have this kind of friendship. But Gidon, I'm not exaggerating when I say that I and our ministry have sat with you for hours in, for example, the Aroma Coffee Shop, and we have fellowshipped, and it's been so rich, and we've received deep revelation. And I often say, this might sound like heresy to a lot of Christians, but I believe it's actually true that I can fellowship with a Baptist and I can receive a certain level of revelation from them. I can fellowship with a Roman Catholic, I can fellowship with a Pentecostal, and I can receive from them. But I can also fellowship with you, Gidon, and with Orthodox Jews, and I can receive the rich sap of my Hebraic roots. And this is a very legitimate exchange. And as David Krupman said, it is a holy exchange that is taking on because we have been grafted into our olive tree, and we are now in the same tree, as it were. And we've never walked this way before. And so it's been a little bit scary. But thank God for the honor of being recognized with so many others today as being a pioneer in this work, because it is a genuine work of the Lord. And today I was just reading in 1 Samuel when Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come, let's go do an exploit." Because he said, God is not obligated to work through the many or through the few. And so we're not a lot, these pioneers, but yet God is working through us. He's building bridges through us, and he's doing a great work in our day. And we're just so thrilled to be a part of the new thing that God is doing, bringing the peoples of the book together, because our Western civilization is in crisis, and it was built on Judeo-Christian ethics. We've got to work together, I believe, to help to save what God has built. And he's bringing us together to pray. He's bringing us together to decree his word. And we are really standing in the gap. We're standing in the gap on the walls, saving Western civilization at this time as Jews and Christians, proclaiming, even praying together. It's a privilege. It's not always understood, but we salute every Jewish person who has been willing to reach out to us. And we're just so thrilled to take that hand of friendship and say, we will go with you, for we know that God is with you. And it's an adventure. Hallelujah. Such a great adventure.
Thank you very, very much, Christine. I will now go to the next person on my left or on my right. I don't know. Everything's backwards over here. And hope that this is going to work. And it's my good friend, Michael Freund. Michael, what I'd like you to do is share your ministry. Tell me how you started with Shavei Israel and some of the exciting things that you've seen since you've been working there.
Sure. Thanks, Gidon. I hope when you said that I might be to your left, you were not referring to political views or anything.
No. Even though there are very few people to my right, but certainly you're not to my left.
Okay. I also just want to start off by saying how grateful I am to you, Gidon, and to Rav Tuli Weiss, and to all the others for everything that you've done, and for this event here this evening. It's no coincidence. I mean, we know there are no coincidences in the world. This week's Torah portion is Akev. It's in the book of Deuteronomy, begins chapter 7, I think it's verse 12. V'haya Ekev tishma'un. God says, if you listen. Now, I believe we're living in a time where God is calling out to Jews and Christians to work together. Not everyone is listening. Not everyone is hearing the message, but a growing number of people are. And I think that what we see on our screen today, the split screen, is a sign of that, a sign of how more and more Jews and Christians are listening and hearing the message. And I hope that through your efforts that will continue for many years to come. I actually, my first sort of exposure to Christian support for Israel, Earl Cox probably is not aware of this, but he's very much a part of it. When I worked back in the 90s for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for the late David Bar-Ilan, Zichrono Livracha, who was the communications director, David had developed a lot of very good relationships with many Christian leaders, including Earl. And they used to come to the office quite often. And it was my first opportunity to speak with Christians and try and get wrap my head around the fact that many of them seemed to love Jews and love Israel, which was something that ran counter to everything I had grown up feeling, believing, sensing, like many Ashkenazi Jews in the New York area. My family was affected by the Holocaust directly. And so there was a lot of built-in suspicion and even fear of non-Jews. Getting to know people like Earl and others was something that sort of opened my eyes to the fact that some kind of change, some kind of major historical change was underway. And I came to see that in an even more pronounced fashion when I became involved with seeking out the lost tribes of Israel and finding lost Jewish communities through the organization I started, Shavei Israel, which is Hebrew for those who return to Israel. As we became increasingly involved in helping, for example, the Bnei Menashe, the children of the tribe of Manasseh in northeastern India, to come back to the land, I began to notice that many Christians were becoming quite enthusiastic and quite excited about it. And again, I just didn't really understand why would Christians get so thrilled that that Jews were going to Israel. Obviously, for 19 centuries, there were many instances where Christians were quite happy to see Jews leave their countries, but it was for a negative reason. Here, it wasn't that at all. It was a true and profound and sincere exhilaration to see Jews going back to Zion, and I simply could not understand why. And then I came across a verse which I quote every time I speak with Christians, and you all know it, but it's Isaiah 49:22, where God says that you, the nations, you will carry us back to the land. And there are other verses like that as well in Isaiah chapter 11 and elsewhere. But that was the verse that really struck me very deeply because, first of all, it is descriptive and prescriptive. God is telling the Jewish people through the prophet Isaiah that at the end of days, when we come back from the four corners of the earth, the nations of the world are going to play an active role in that process. And the visual imagery that is used in the verse is very powerful. The verse could have just said, the nations of the world will help the Jews go home. But this image of carrying is a very compelling one, because when you carry something, you are hands-on, you are actively involved. When you carry something, you are elevating it, you are lifting it up from one place, and you are taking it to its destination. And I figured if it's good enough for the prophet Isaiah, it's good enough for me. And if that is part of the divine plan, that the nations of the world should be hands-on in facilitating the return of our people from the four corners of the earth, well, hey, I finally began to get it. I finally began to understand those Christians who have a heart for Aliyah and the ingathering of the exiles and the return to Zion. And I am, over the years, I've gotten to know many of the other bridge builders here, and I've been blessed to partner with many of them. We've brought 4,000 Bnei Menashe on Aliyah from India so far. We have permission to bring another 700, God willing, in the coming year and a half. And with each of these aliyot, Christians have always been there carrying our children home, carrying us with their prayers, with their love, with their encouragement, with their support. In whatever fashion they've been able to do so, they've been there. Even during the tough times, even during the years where certain left-leaning Israeli governments tried to halt or slow down the aliyah of the Bnei Menashe. Nonetheless, many of my Christian friends were always there with encouragement, reminding me of, I guess, the obvious, which is when God promises something, he delivers. When the prophet Isaiah says that the nations of the world are going to carry our children back home, they're going to carry our children back home. Even if a certain left-wing government at the time wasn't thrilled with it, Man cannot stand in the way of the fulfillment of the divine plan. And so it's been a great blessing for me and for my organization to partner with you. And I really do believe that this is we're at a point where this kind of dialogue is becoming almost routine. And we should never lose sight, though, of the fact that there is nothing routine about this. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, if someone had said that Jews and Christians, that pastors and rabbis would be gathering together in friendship and in solidarity and support for one another, they probably would have been taken away to an institution of one form or another. And I don't mean a religious one. Look at how far we have come. All of us, look at how far we have come. And I think that this too is a part of God's plan, and it's a sign of the very special times in which we are living. I believe fundamentally that Aliyah, that the return to Zion, is a tangible proof that God is with us, that the words of the prophets are literally jumping off the pages, coming to life before our very eyes. And the critical component of that is the partnership between Jews and Christians. So I hope and pray, Gidon and Raftuli, that the two of you will continue to be blessed with bringing Christians and Jews and Christian and Jewish leaders together for a true and sincere and meaningful dialogue.
Thank you very, very much, my friend Michael Freund. I'm excited, along with many of the other bridge builders here and the people who are watching with us on YouTube and who will be watching later on as well. So excited to see the prophecies that you have been so instrumental in bringing along. And I would dare say, I often, when I discuss with my Jewish friends who haven't really swallowed the Kool-Aid yet, that still think that Christians, how could you trust them? I say, listen, the prophets talk about the nations coming up to the land of Israel, coming up to the Mount of Zion, coming to learn the Torah from the Jewish people, talking about how 10 people from all the nations will grab hold of the tzitzit, of the cloak, of the corner of a Jewish person, and say, we want to come with you because we've heard God with you. These, I think, are so much part of the prophecies that come later, because we are already living in such messianic and redemptive times that the Jewish people are coming back to their homeland. We are almost, I use that word a little bit lightly or liberally, we're almost a majority of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel. So many Jews are coming back after generations and generations of distance from their Father in heaven. So many are coming back to a faith, belief, and following of God's ways. We, as we've heard tonight, Rabbi Yehuda Glick and so many activists about the Temple Mount are bringing the definitivity, the absolute certainty that the temple will be rebuilt so much closer, and so many people are thinking about the temple as well. I asked my Jewish friends, okay, if that's what's happening, what's left? And the answer is that it's true that the Jewish people are coming back to their homeland, are learning Hebrew, are becoming closer to their God in heaven, are close to the service in the temple. But what about the other 99.9% people in the world? We have a mandate for them as well. And so I think that this activity of building bridges between Jews and Christians to respond to that which God is putting into the heart of Christians all over the world, and from the Christians he will put it into the hearts of all the peoples of the world, that is where we, both Christians and Jews tonight, are so close and being in the and the cutting edge of the realization of these prophecies, just like you, Michael, are the realization of the prophecy of bringing back the lost tribes of Israel. Thank you very much. I would now like to turn to my good friend Earl Cox. And Earl, my question to you is, tell me a little bit about what you've been doing in this field of Jews and Christians together. Maybe, I know that you've been interviewing many Jews and Christians on your radio show. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the very exciting people that you've met, that you remember all of those years.
First of all, let me say you are doing a great job as the host. Okay. When I was listening to Michael just a few moments ago, I couldn't help but think, how many times in my life since stepping out in support of the state of Israel, have I asked myself the question, if I were a Jew, would I like a Christian? To be quite honest with you, based on past performances of the Christian community and many Christians of the old, I would probably have to say it would be very difficult for me to want to welcome a Christian into my community. Now, when I said that, let me preface that by saying I do not believe that those Christians at that time were really Christians of the book that I read, because the Bible that I read clearly states that God loves the Jewish people. They're the apple of his eye. He says that I will bless Abraham and his descendants, and I'll send them home. Now, how could I possibly in any way whatsoever not support the state of Israel simply because of what the Bible tells me? That, number one. Let me go back about 20 years ago, if I may, and tell you when I stepped out in support of the state of Israel, what I did was bought television, billboards, and I wrote all kinds of articles in support of the state of Israel. Well, the whole South Carolina area Jewish community started wondering, what in the world is going on here? This is a Christian advertising that he supports the state of Israel and that South Carolina should stand with the state of Israel. Well, the Jewish community summoned me to come in and sit down and talk with them. And it was quite a lot of them at that time. There were 5 rabbis, all very, very knowledgeable about Christians and their own theology. And they questioned me for over an hour and 15 minutes. Well, at the end of that hour and 15 minutes, I can recall very vividly the meanest rabbi of all of them that gave me the biggest problems in the world. He jumped out of his chair. I didn't know if he was coming to hit me or to, but he came up and loved me around the neck and said, "Welcome, brother." Boy, that was such a good feeling. And I'll never forget when I put the billboard up in Tel Aviv, a great big billboard that was saying Christians from South Carolina love Israel. Ehud Olmert was the mayor at that time of Jerusalem. Well, he sent his people out to find who this guy Earl Cox is. Well, I met with him. He talked with me about an hour and a half, and before long, we've become friends, and we've been friends ever since. But to top all of that off, a Knesset member, he wanted to find out who Earl Cox was at the same time. And he was not a very nice person that I had known, but in any event, he sent 2 of his emissaries to come and get me and to bring me over to the Knesset and to have lunch with him. Well, I sat there in the Knesset cafeteria along with his 2 assistants. And all of a sudden, he comes walking in with his lunch and he sits down in front of me. And he looks at me straight in the face after about 2 or 3 minutes of not speaking to me and says, "You would like to convert me, wouldn't you?" I said, "I beg your pardon?" He said, "You invited me here. I didn't invite you." And we talked, and after we talked a good hour or so, we left. 2 days later, this man who did not like Christians whatsoever sent his emissary and asked if I would become a part of his advisory board.
Wow.
I could not believe it. So I guess what it all boils down to, we that are in the Christian community need to show the love of what we say we are, of the Bible. And we need to stand with the Jewish people, no matter what it takes. We should share our finances with them. We should share our love with them. We should say, what can we do to help you? And that's for the last 20 years is what I've been trying to do. I can't wait to get back to Israel right now because of the coronavirus. I can't go, unfortunately, but I plan to be there for about 3 more months so I can work among the people. But all the folks that you've had on, both Jewish and Christian people, I've recognized the names as Michael had indicated, so many of them that I've had relationships and worked with them over the time. And I'm just so pleased and thankful for people like you that have taken the time from your schedule to help build bridges, the bridge builders. And people like Rabbi Truly Wise, who has been on the front lines building bridges with roots. And as I think about Earl Cox in Israel, I can't help but think about my roots. My roots come from the Jewish community. And I am so blessed and so happy that I can say, with all of my energy, effort, I am with you, I support you, and I will do whatever I can to help move this movement as rapidly as possible because I think it's necessary.
Well, thank you very, very much, Earl. And like I said before, you are definitely one of those people that I saw when I was first gingerly taking my first steps into this pond of Christians and Jews together. I remember when you were a radio host, and I believe you still are a radio host. So I'm getting your notifications every week, and your voice is not only a beautiful melodious voice and such a radiophonic voice, but is truly a strong voice for the building the bridges and standing up for Israel. Last but certainly not least, I'm happy to bring along my friend Sondra, who has been waiting so patiently. And I'd like to ask you, Sondra, I'm sure that many of our viewers here know you and the great important work that you've been doing. I'd like to talk about that as well, but not in order to end on a tav tzoreim, as we say in Hebrew, on a sour note, because we are going to finish with HaTikva, with the hope. But I'd like you to, besides talking about the great, wonderful things that you've seen in your career, I'd like you to also talk about some challenges that we face as bridge builders today, if you don't mind. Thank you very much, and the pin is yours.
Thank you, Gidon. It really has been a very, very exciting and impressive evening, and I'm very happy that you invited me to participate. Well, let me just introduce a little bit of how I got started. I live in Karnei Shomron. I live in Samaria, and I've been living in Israel since 1984. And when I first arrived in Israel, you know, my husband and I, we had 2 babies, and one of the first things we did was sign a contract to build a house in Samaria. And from the beginning, I was a passionate advocate for the right of the Jewish people to settle and live in Judea and Samaria. That was my issue. Christians were not my issue, not because I had anything against Christians. They weren't on my radar screen, you know? And so, and of course, at the time, and then it took a few years till our house was built, but when we moved into our house in '87, just a few months later, the first Intifada began, which kind of like all of a sudden I found myself a young mother. I was a practicing lawyer at the time. And yet suddenly I found myself being interviewed by, you know, all kinds of media. Well, they didn't have the new media then, but, you know, radio, television from all over the world. And people wanted to know, who are these settlers and why is everybody hating them? And everybody that I spoke to hated us. I mean, there wasn't a group I spoke to, there wasn't a media outlet that I was interviewed by that didn't have enormous scorn for who we are and what we represented. And then here and there, I came upon these Christian groups, and coming before them, expecting the same scorn, I would give my little thing, you know, explanation, and I got a hallelujah, or, you know, may God bless you. And I would kind of say, scratch my head, well, who are these people, you know? And that's really how it began. And I must say, when I started Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, it was not my idea. It was an idea of a Christian family that I had only recently encountered. And at that time, I was, I think, the first Orthodox Jew in Israel, certainly one of the first Orthodox Jews in Israel that even went into this. And we're talking to Christians. And so I really learned things as I went along. So today, when I see I really am honored to be called a bridge builder. But for me, when I started, it really was about building bridges for, finding partners for a very specific cause for Israel and for biblical Israel. And I feel like afterwards, over the years, came around to this idea that it's not just the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel that's a fulfillment of prophecy, but the very partnership between Christians and Jews in and of itself is a fulfillment of prophecy. So I feel like, here we just hit a double header. It's just amazing. And I feel privileged to be part of that. But your question, Gidon, I think is a very important one. And I really want to just mention two things. One of the biggest challenges that I faced at the beginning was tremendous opposition to what we were doing within the Jewish community here in Israel and within the Jewish community within the so-called settlements in Judea and Samaria. I was not a very popular person within quite a number of rabbinic circles. And in fact, there were people that were calling me up and people talking to me and say, why do you have to call yourself Christian Friends of Israeli Communities? You're not Christian. And I would say, because this is what we represent. This is the big deal. Don't just say Friends of Israeli Communities. It's Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. And that's what we represent. And that's what I think is what's new. It's what's important. And, there were all kinds of do-gooders. There were, of course, people that were nasty and, there were people who called up all the communities we worked with and said, how dare you work with Sondra? You don't want to work with Christians. So we were dealing with this kind of stuff. And all along, I really felt, and I've just always been this way, because it's kind of how my parents raised me. If you're doing what you think is right, who cares what anybody says? And that has always been my attitude. And I have to say that God has blessed our efforts, not just that we've grown this organization and we've really been able to do important things to help the people in Judea and Samaria. Everything we're about is having Christian support from all over the world, advocating for Judea and Samaria, raising their voices, coming to visit to see for themselves, and providing financial support for the very real needs in the communities in Judea and Samaria, where so many philanthropies, Jewish and otherwise, boycott these communities. So that's grown. But in addition, I must say that in recent years, this idea of Jewish opposition has more or less melted away. And I'm very pleased. And we have had conversations with rabbis. I have brought pastors to meet with rabbis from different countries so that they can have the direct conversation. Sometimes I'm the translator because the rabbi doesn't know any English. But it's been an amazing experience. And I think this is really what was a challenge to begin with, I think today has really grown into an opportunity. Enabling these different people to talk to one another. So that has been a challenge, but less so today. Today, I must say, there is something that Earl, when you spoke now, made a comment, and it's just something that I'm dealing with just in these past few days. I don't know how many of you have been following this, but a very dear friend, very dear Christian friend of mine, Tommy Waller, and I have been doing a series called Facing the Divide. And we have programs where the two of us we take a particular issue where Christians and Jews may see things differently, and we discuss it. And it's getting a lot of very positive feedback. And we just released a program last week on the subject of Christian anti-Semitism. To me, that was the least controversial topic that I could think of, because all the Christians that I've talked to that love Israel, and that is a large part of our audience. Of course, Christians already love Israel. I'm not real good at turning anti-Semites into lovers of Israel. That's really not my thing. I'm not good at that. But anyway, so, we did this whole program about that. And surprisingly, got not a lot, but a number of responses that were troubled and in one case actually angry that I would put those two words together, Christian and anti-Semitism. And it was very interesting what you were saying, Earl, because you were saying there's no question that those people were not doing what Christianity meant for them to be doing, you know, and I agree with that 100%. But what I've been extremely involved with over these last few days is bringing this message to Christians who found offense in putting those two terms together, Christian anti-Semitism. And as a Jew, I think it's extremely important that Christians understand, and as I've said to many people, if we don't understand the past, if Christians cannot look squarely in the face and say, yes, Christians were anti-Semites, that the worst anti-Semitism that happened throughout the last, 1700 years were perpetrated by Christians. Now, were they good Christians? No. Were they doing what Christianity wanted them to be doing? No. But they were doing it as self-identifying as Christians and in the name of the church. And this is something that I believe, in order for us to ensure that this bridge building is true and honest, that Christians have to look back and say, yes, our roots are there. Are we at fault? We love Israel? Absolutely not. Our Christian friends are doing some of the most amazing things because they are turning their backs on that bad history and looking forward and doing something completely different. But if this is a challenge that I feel we're facing now that I wasn't expecting, and I reach out to my Christian friends to help explain this issue to Christians, that because you yourself are not an anti-Semite, because you realize that Christianity is not about anti-Semitism, it shouldn't be, but that doesn't mean that as Christians, it's very important to understand what Christianity was, how it was expressed, rightly or wrongly. I think wrongly, I'm sure you'll all agree, wrongly, but to understand and face that. And I believe this is critical for us to be able to expand this movement of Christian-Jewish relationships.
Thank you very, very much, Sondra. I love that last few words. Let us expand that field of Christian-Jewish relationships. I'd like to, first of all, get the pin back on me. I'm sitting in a chair that doesn't have a pin on it, so I have to pin myself to the screen. I want to once again express my gratitude. First of all, of course, to my wife, who's been sitting here behind me and keeping a finger on the technology, and has been a supporter, just as other people have mentioned their spouses. My wife, Deborah, has been a very important supporter of me and so many of our friends who we've had in our home, both in Ma'ale Adumim before we moved here to Ma'ale Hever, to the Judean desert that you see behind us, and is truly an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor and a Ezer Kenegdi, a helpmate. And I appreciate you, Deborah, very much. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to express my gratitude to everybody who has responded to the Bridge Builder initiative. Whenever you start something new, people are always wondering, well, who else is doing it? And is it okay? And is it the right thing? Or maybe it's not the wrong. But we've had 70 people who have recognized that this is the direction that God is asking the world to go. So if this year is 70, the next year might be 700 and maybe 7,000. And I do believe that you are not only the bridge builders, but you are the spearheaders and the path finders. And I'm very grateful to you, as our viewers are as well. I do hope that we will all be able to continue to cooperate in the future, bring more and more people. When Shlomo Streiben from Israel 365 said, when I told him that I was planning on making videos of everybody introducing themselves, he said, it'll be easier to get $500 from each one of them. To get a video from people is very, very difficult. Well, so many of you came through. We've had, I think, about half of the bridge builders were able to do that. I was very grateful to my friends in the Knesset, Knesset member Sharon Eskel, who is the chair of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, and of course my good friend, former Speaker of the Knesset and presently the Minister of Health in Israel, Yuli Edelstein, who's got quite a history of his own that one day we'll have him on to tell about it. And it's just amazing how more and more people are grabbing hold of this. So thank you all very much for allowing me to have all of us celebrate you with you. And with your permission, I will now share the screen one more time with a beautiful video that I found. There's no such thing as an Israeli event or an event to honor Israel that doesn't end with HaTikva. So now we will sing a version of HaTikva. Put your speakers up and keep your eyes on the screen because it is a very beautiful example. And then we will say shalom to all of us. And there must be a way to start this. Here we go.
נפש יהודי הומייה ותן מזרח קדימה עין לציון צופיה עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו שנות אלפיים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון ירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון
Toda rabah to all of you. Thank you very, very much for making this such a wonderful event. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all, not only next year, but each and every day throughout the year. Bring more and more people to the Bridgebuilders. Toda rabah and Laila Tov.